Good morning, everybody. Nice to have you all here this morning. So I'm just going to give a moment also to allow everybody to join. Before we move on into some introductions, we're going to cover the agenda for today's session and just a little bit of housekeeping. So looks as though we do have a few of you all come in across now, which is great. Thank you very much, all of you, for taking the time out of your day to attend today. I appreciate you are all probably very busy, and so it means a lot that you are here. So I'm going to jump forward then into a quick introduction, as I said, the agenda and some housekeeping. So my name is Lauren Siddons. I am Procurement and Contracts Manager at Nexus Multi Academy Trust. You may be thinking, why are you from Nexus Multi Academy Trust and not Go for Growth? Now the answer for that is that Nexus and Go for Growth are in partnership. I did actually used to work for Go for Growth until early last year, so I'm now back, and if you have been to any of these webinars before, you may have seen me on these before, so well, thank you again for being here. So to let you know, you may have heard when you joined the call, but today's session is being recorded, and the reason for that is that will be sharing a copy of the recording along with the slide deck from today's session at some point likely this afternoon. Any links that you will see during today's session are going to be live links in the slide deck, so you are able to follow any links that you do see throughout today's session. You are able to utilise what I've popped down as the Q&A or the chat function to ask any questions throughout today's session, but I don't know whether there is a Q&A function, but there is a chat function. So if somebody would anybody mind just maybe just type in and pop something into the chat function, just so we can see that it does work. I'll pop a hi in there just to start us off. Perfect. Thank you, Ash. Brilliant. So as I've already mentioned, then slides will be sent out with a copy of the recording, and that's to all registered attendees. So a little bit about what we will be covering today then. So, bear with me 1 second. So then initially what we are going to be covering is we're taking a look at why the public sector may be a good customer, and then we're going to take a look at the new regulations and how these new regulations how they're designed to support small businesses and voluntary sector organisations to access opportunities within the public sector. Following that, we are going to be looking at the public sector offer, so how the public sector are looking to help you promote your organisation, before taking a look at social value and carbon net zero, as these are two distinct areas where you might actually be able to stand out from the crowd in what is a crowded market. And then we are going to be thinking about your public sector toolkit, so what tools you need to be accessing public sector opportunities. We're going to be chatting you through something called the Public Sector Supplier Ready Accreditation, which is accessible via Go for Growth, before finishing off with some common pitfalls and some key messages. I have also set some time aside towards the end for questions, but as I mentioned, if any questions do pop into the chat function as we are going through today's session, I will keep my eye on it and answer any questions that I can as we are going. Brilliant, let's get started then. So taking a look then at the public sector. So, and I won't dwell on this one too much, since you being here already probably signals that you do have an interest in working with the public sector. But this is a good reminder, or what we're going to cover is just really a reminder of why the public sector can be a good potential customer. Now, the way in which that you do find yourself working with the public sector can really differ. So, for example, your organisation may be looking to bid directly for a contract individually, or you may be considering bidding as part of a collaboration or consortia. But also you may work for a contracting authority via the supply chain as a subcontractor. So many different ways. And what Go for Growth are trying to achieve is to provide smaller organisations with the right resources. This is to build overall knowledge and confidence, so that if you do, or when you identify an opportunity and you are looking to place a bid directly with the public sector, that you have all of the necessary tools and knowledge to be able to do so. So taking a look into public sector contracts and why they could be a good option for your organisation. We've highlighted some of the reasons on the screen. So to run through a few of those. So this is the last government actually set a mandate to pass 33%, to place 33% of all spend with small to medium enterprises and deliver public good. Now, public good often is termed as social value within the public sector. And those of you who have been exploring opportunities in the public sector, I'm sure you will have already seen social value mentioned quite a lot, whether this be in pre-market engagement events, whether this be in tender documentation, and we are going to be covering social value in more detail throughout today's session. But to get us started on that, in the public sector, there is something called the Public Services Act, or the Social Value Act, which was assented into law back in January 2013, but the Act was enacted in 2012. Now, what the Act requires public bodies to consider is how their contracts can improve the economic, social and environmental well-being of the area that they serve. And this means going beyond just cost and quality to thinking about the actual social and economic impact of every pound that they spend of taxpayers' money. And the public sector market is actually worth almost or just under 300 billion a year. And in addition to this, it is a stable market, of course. They're just a few reasons as to why the public sector is a good customer. And another thing is that there is almost certainly opportunities for everyone or for all organisations in the public sector. So whether that be through grant funding routes or whether it be through public sector contracts, which is what we focus on, there is a real drive and ambition for public sector contracting authorities to be placing more business with SMEs. And when I say SMEs, this is including micro and sole traders. So as we've said, there can be some real positives around working for the public sector, and there is something called the National Procurement Policy Statement, or NPPS, which was released or announced back in February. Now, the policy reinforces actually the current government's desire to also support the marketplace. And what the policy effectively describes is what is important to every public procurement activity that goes out to the market. And this includes things such as we've mentioned, supporting SMEs and voluntary sector organisations. Again, that's including the sole traders and micro businesses. It includes tackling things like carbon reduction and also building skills in the procurement community, but also in the marketplace. So upskilling the marketplace to make the opportunities more accessible, but also educating our procurement teams to ensure that they are aware of how they may have been creating barriers to entry, but not realising, and how we can avoid that going forward. Now, another thing is the new regulations for public procurement, which came into force in February this year. So that is the Procurement Act 2023. And the Procurement Act also places a greater emphasis on removing barriers to entry, which is great news for smaller organisations and the voluntary sector. So that is what we are going to move on to. We're going to take a look at public sector regulations next, and how these regulations help to support smaller organisations. And there are a number of things. So the first thing that we've highlighted is the duty to consider and remove barriers to entry for SMEs. So under the Procurement Act, the duty to consider the barriers which SMEs might face and how those barriers can be removed is actually a key provision. And so this duty requires public sector contracting authorities to actively assess and address barriers that may prevent small and medium enterprises from participating in and winning public contracts. So this in turn promotes greater transparency, simpler processes, prompt payments, and early market engagement. And this is all designed to make these opportunities more accessible. And one thing that we did mention just there is early market engagement or pre-market engagement. Which leads me on to the next point, which I've noted here. So pre-market engagement can be a real benefit to potential providers, as what pre-market engagement does is it gives an opportunity for suppliers to actively show interest in the opportunities that are upcoming, but it also gives suppliers an opportunity to get involved in conversation with the contracting authorities to understand what it is that they're wanting to purchase, and also potentially influence what is being procured and how it's being procured. This pre-market engagement is learning time for procurement teams as well, to understand what is available on the market, what is the market looking like, how is it acting, and what would be the best process for them to run. And they want suppliers to get involved and help them I guess, to educate those decisions. And like we've said, avoiding those barriers to entries can be, getting involved in these conversations can be really key. If you identify when you attend pre-market engagement events, the fact that the contracting authority is looking to go down a certain route and you think that could make things more difficult for your organisation, speak up and for all we know, that could affect how they do choose to go to the market. A little bit more about that. So the ways in which pre-market engagement can take place, it can differ. So this may be face-to-face events, it may be virtual events. And what the Procurement Act also does is it requires contracting authorities to actually publish notices relating to any pre-market engagement that takes place. This is called the, or a preliminary market engagement notice. I can never say it first time around. And the notice is basically intended to provide information about how the contracting authority will be engaging with suppliers or how they have already done that. And the notice must be published before the publishing of a tender notice, so before an opportunity goes live. So next one then, I'm not going to go into this one in too much detail, as we did cover the Public Services Act or social value in the previous slide, and we will be covering this in a lot more detail in later slides. But just to recap, that the Public Services Act or the Social Value Act requires public bodies to consider how their contracts can improve the economic, social and environmental well-being of the area they serve. And this is thinking about the social and economic impact of every pound that they spend of taxpayers' money. So that was just a quick recap, but again, we'll come to it more in a few slides. Just take a quick drink. Just thought I'd check the chat function as well whilst I had a quick pause, but there's nothing there at the moment, but I will keep my eye on that as we move on. So next thing that I've mentioned then is pipelines. So under the Procurement Act, authorities with an annual spend of over 100 million are actually required to publish what we call pipeline notices. And these notices provide the market with advance information about upcoming public contracts that are valued over 2 million. And again, this is all designed with supporting small to medium-sized businesses to be able to plan, but not just small to medium enterprise SMEs to plan, but those looking to take part in public sector opportunities. It gives time to plan and ensure that there's enough time around when the opportunity is going live to set time aside to actually respond to the opportunity. And one thing that we will come to later in today's session is actually the planning and what is involved in taking part in an opportunity. So getting involved earlier, like we've said, these pre-market engagement events, planning in advance is really important to ensure a good quality bid. And another reason why we've included pipelines in this section of today's session is that whilst the requirement is actually only mandatory for contracts above 2 million, what we are actually seeing is that lots of contracting authorities or organisations are actually publishing pipelines much lower than that, even below threshold. So taking a look on contracting authorities or customers that you are able to identify that you're interested in working with, take a look what they are publishing, what is within their pipeline that they've got usually on their website. If you take a look on say for example a local council's website, you'll find an area dedicated to procurement, and that's where you'll tend to find their forward pipeline. And if you see any opportunities on there which are of interest to you, it's worth obviously taking time to note what they're doing about that, what are the key dates, to ensure that you have capability within your organisation to respond to the opportunity if you do decide that you're wanting to go for that. So moving on then to MAT. So if you're not familiar with what used to be MEAT and is now MAT, this may just seem to make no sense, but I'm going to explain this. So the introduction of the Procurement Act has seen what was formerly known as MEAT, or the Most Economically Advantageous Tender, to become MAT, which stands for the Most Advantageous Tender. Now, this is used to assess the value of contracts in the public sector. Now, to lots of procurement teams, this change, it won't make a huge difference, as it's what procurement teams have already been encouraged to be doing and what they have been doing. But the effectively what the change is signalling to buyers is that in removing the E for economic is sending a clear message that value for money doesn't necessarily mean cost, as in it doesn't mean the cheapest thing, because the cheapest thing isn't always the best. We know the saying, the buy cheap, buy twice kind of thing, and that can be the same. Lowest price doesn't mean the best option. And what this change is also promoting is the consideration of more qualitative factors such as social value, such as sustainability, workforce conditions, and local economic growth, alongside price and technical ability. But yeah, lowest price doesn't mean the best. And we as procurers, we need to be considering value in its other forms, which is what has really steered that change away from the most economically advantageous tender to the most advantageous tender, and that's the what a public contract should be awarded against, so the most advantageous submission. So final thing on this slide then, so the central digital platform. The central digital platform is the, so it's the government's enhanced online portal, and it's an extension of what originally was the Find a Tender service. Now, I will note here that the Find a Tender service is still active, and the central digital platform is just an extension of this. So Find a Tender service, central digital platform, if you are hearing people, whether it's procurers, whether it's in tender documentation, if you're seeing central digital platform or Find a Tender service, it's the same place, it's the same thing. And it's designed to serve as the central hub for all public sector procurement under the Procurement Act. So what the platform is designed to do is simplify the process, and that's both for suppliers to find and bid on opportunities, but also for contracting authorities to be meeting transparency requirements by providing basically just a single easy to use platform. So it's to make things easier both for procurers and for suppliers. So that brings me to the end of this slide then. So it's just covering some of the ways in which the public sector regulations are designed to support your organisation. So what we are going to move on to next then, so is the public sector offer. So how does the public sector aim to help you get to know them, and how can you get involved in helping them get to know you, kind of thing? And you will see as I go further down this list that a lot of these events, they can sound quite similar. They have different purposes. Well, they tend to have different purposes, but they can be quite interlinked, and you'll see the reasons why it's important to get out to these events. They can be similar, but these are just what we've decided to highlight is a few different types of engagement events that you can get involved in. So we have already discussed pre-market engagement in the previous slides, but I just wanted to reiterate here that it is a key way of interacting with the public sector. So getting involved with pre-market engagement, it's a really useful tool for you to make use of. As we mentioned previously, it doesn't only allow you to get to know your customer and what it is that they are buying, but it also can help to shape what's being procured and how. So it's really important that you are looking out for these notices. As we said, pre-market engagement notices or preliminary market engagement notices will be published. That'll be to the central digital platform, to procurement portals. So ensuring that you are keeping your eye out for these being posted. And pre-market engagement is usually very specific to a particular opportunity. This leads me into Meet the Buyer events. So Meet the Buyer events can take place in a number of ways. These might be hosted as part of pre-market engagement. So a Meet the Buyer event may be hosted for a specific opportunity, but it's more likely to be for a broader range of things. So for example, early last year I attended, I believe it was Doncaster Council's Meet the Buyer event, and the Meet the Buyer event, it was focused more towards construction, but any supplier could attend. It's an opportunity where you can get in front of the council, you can introduce yourself, introduce your offering, what it is that your organisation does, introduce yourself, and it's also a really good opportunity for networking. So yes, they can take place online, in person, but keep an eye out for those. One thing that I will be highlighting towards the end of this slide, but I may as well just do that now considering I've already said it, is keeping your eye out for these types of events on social media. So as I've mentioned, there will be things posted on Find a Tender service or the central digital platform dependent on values. There will be things posted on contracting authorities' procurement portals, but it's becoming increasingly popular that contracting authorities are actively posting on their social media, especially LinkedIn, posting about events that they're going to be attending, whether it's events that they're hosting themselves or whether it's ones that they are just in attendance for, whether they've got a stand somewhere. But keeping up to date with what's being posted on their social media can be a really useful tool as well. So next then, so place-based business events. So there are often place-based business events, and one example that we've used is Leeds Business Week. And this is where local organisations, commissioning organisations, and that is in both the private and public sector, come together to talk about their organisations. So it's a chance for people to, again, speak about what's important to them, what's on their agenda. but also suppliers tend to attend these events. It may be as a sponsor. So I attended an event recently where a supplier sponsored by doing the catering for the event. So it may be that you're attending as a sponsor, as a supplier, or it may be that there may be stands. So as I mentioned, the Doncaster Meet the Buyer event that was construction focused, there was tons of construction suppliers attending the event that had a stand, leaflets, flyers, freebies. Obviously, everybody loves a freebie at these events, where they have that option to speak with these contracting authorities that have attended those place-based business events, and that is focused usually on an area more than an opportunity, which is again why we've used the Leeds Business Week as an example there. But all of these events, I just want to again really stress that it's good to get out there and be having conversations with maybe those key decision makers, because you don't know if you're there to discuss a specific opportunity that's upcoming. If that event is focused around those opportunities, it's likely that the procurers or the people that are going to be developing those tender documents are going to be there, and you can be having those conversations and really understand what it is that they're trying to achieve through these opportunities. Final thing then that we've included on here is sectoral events. So we've used Net Zero Week as an example here, and these sectoral type events will usually be focused on more of a subject matter as opposed to a procurement competition or a place. So we're not looking at leads specifically, we're looking more at a certain element such as net zero. We're not looking at a specific tender opportunity, it is a actual topic or a subject. And these may be focused in other things around, like maybe social care focused, they may be construction focused, but they focus on a certain topic, which is what I'm trying to get across. And there are lots of these types of events taking place, and they can be a really great opportunity to gain more knowledge about a specific subject or about a specific industry. So definitely do keep your eye out for these being advertised by the contracting authorities. And again, this is where I was going to give the shout out to LinkedIn to say that it's a really great platform to utilise for staying updated. I know Go for Growth are so active, Nexus are really active on LinkedIn. We like to let people know where we're going to be, what we're doing, and also just speaking about what's important to us, and you're able to respond to those things as well, so we can connect, we can see what you're speaking about. And yeah, it's a really useful tool, is social media, and it's becoming a more and more useful tool. Absolutely. Just going to check, and there's no questions at the moment, which is all good. Oh. So Gail, I'm just reading your message, bear with me a second. So Meet the Buyer events seem to work for suppliers or contractors, but less so for professional services. It feels like procurers see less value. And I mean, it's difficult to say, Gail, because there'll be Meet the Buyer events that are focused on, if it's a general Meet the Buyer event, even if it has more of a focus, say towards, I do for whatever reason keep using construction as an example, but these Meet the Buyer events don't necessarily mean that is all that the focus is. It's giving you an opportunity just to get in front of that customer and introduce yourself. So even if it's not based on your specific type of offering, it's still definitely worth you attending these events and having the conversations, introducing yourself. There'll be other providers such as yourself attending these. So I attended Barnsley and Rotherham Chamber of Commerce event last week, which was, there was providers, suppliers from every type of industry you could think of. There were different councils there. So with the Rotherham Council, Barnsley Council, there was Doncaster Council, we had NHS trusts. We were obviously in attendance, showcasing the support that we're able to offer to the market. So just keeping an eye out. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be specific to a procurement, but just events that your local authorities are hosting. It's really it's good to be out there and getting involved in conversation, because if you aren't, other people are, is the way that I'd see it. Yeah, and if you do want to discuss any more detail, Gail, do feel free to book a mentoring session, and we can have a chat about this kind of thing in more detail. So I'm just going to move forward now then onto the next slide when it wants to work with me. So over the next few slides, I'm going to be covering social value and carbon net zero. So starting with social value, and we have mentioned social value briefly within previous slides, and the fact that it is driven by the Public Services or Social Value Act, but we are years, obviously that was 2012, 2013, but years on, social value and its importance to the public sector is ever growing, which is why we have included this in today's session. And social value is about the wider positive impact that your organisation can have on society. So beyond the core goods or services that you deliver, and that could be anything from creating local jobs, it could be supporting local business, providing training opportunities, through to like engaging in some community projects. But for procurement teams, what it's about is shifting away from being focused on value for money purely based on price and quality, towards considering the broader impact that suppliers are able to deliver through the work they are doing. Now, what you will see, and I appreciate it is rather small in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, is the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And these are part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which was adopted by all United Nations member states back in 2015. And it's basically a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet, both now and into the future. And at its heart, there are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And there are also a set of targets, which together are an urgent call to action by all countries in a global partnership. And what they are aiming to do is recognise that ending poverty and all other deprivations, it must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, reducing inequality and spurring economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve oceans and forests. Now, what we are seeing is that social value and our ability to enable social impact through our business or through our bids can actually be the difference between winning and losing an opportunity. So in the public sector, we're seeing weightings of up to 20% for social value, and the terminology also captures environmental in there as well. So anything to do with sustainability would be captured under the terminology of social value. So it's becoming ever more important in those bids that you are submitting, and you'll see that in the weighting of how they're being broken down by contracting authorities and what's important to them, what is going to affect your overall score. So that covers social value for today then, but what we're going to take a look at next is carbon net zero as a subject matter itself, and what it is. So put simply, net zero means cutting carbon emissions to a small amount of residual emissions that can be absorbed durably and durably stored, should I say, by nature and other carbon dioxide removal measures. So leaving zero carbon in our world's atmosphere. And the UK government have set targets around this. So these targets include reducing emissions by 45% by 2030 and a commitment to reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And for the public sector, this is a target, and increasingly every contract they award needs to show alignment with that goal, which is why, again, we've included this in today's session, because it's becoming more and more important. It's on the agenda of the public sector. It's going to be taking part in bids. And why do we need to be focusing on this? So quite simply, tackling climate change is one of the most urgent challenges that we face, I guess, and reducing carbon emissions helps to protect our environment. It supports healthier communities, and it ensures long-term sustainability for the economy and for businesses. It's about also about resilience. Organisations that are reducing energy use or cutting waste and are innovative around sustainability, they tend to be more efficient and competitive in the long run, or will be more efficient and competitive in the long run. And when we are thinking about the public sector, so what they are looking for from suppliers, so they're wanting to see clear plans. So, for example, a carbon reduction plan that's telling the story, or so a carbon reduction plan, for example, or detail of any steps that you've already taken to be measuring or reducing your emissions, or even just commitments to using greener materials. What the key is to provide evidence, so measurable actions that are demonstrating that your business is actively contributing to the net zero journey. And in short, net zero it isn't just a policy, it's becoming a standard expectation in public procurement, and showing how you align with that can really strengthen your bids. And that's why we wanted to include that in today's session. And it was just a bit of a whistle-stop tour for social value and carbon net zero. And as we've mentioned, strengthening bids, that's what we are going to look into next. But I do seem to have a notification in here somewhere. I don't know, it is a Q&A function. I just couldn't see it on my bar, so I apologize that I've not gotten to this sooner. So the central digital platform registration, can it be a generic email, not an individual name? And how does the contact number link to any future submissions? So would it be, so I need to look at the actual login, because without seeing the login page in front of me, I can't remember exactly what the requirements are. We do have a demonstration video of registration for the central digital platform. So if you would like to, when we send the follow-up email this afternoon, if you would like to respond to the email with your question regarding the central digital platform, what we could do is book a one-to-one call in and run through that registration process. Or what I will do, even better, I'll make a note for you. I don't have my pen there. I'll make a mental note to include in the follow-up email this afternoon a link to the registration demo video. But if that doesn't answer your question, do get in touch and we can run through this in a little more detail on a one-to-one basis. Okay, hope that is helpful. So moving on then to must-have toolkit items. So these are some of the things that will always stand you in good stead when trying to compete in what is a crowded marketplace. So the first thing we've highlighted then are case studies. So case studies are your opportunity to showcase your business in the way that you want to. And these may be, so they may be video case studies, they may be written case studies. Go for Growth have done both types of these, and you can see them on our YouTube channel or via our website if you want to take a look at some examples. And case studies are often asked for in competitions, and they're a really good way of showcasing what it is that you do viewed by others. So those that you've worked with, highlighting their experiences with you as an organisation. So they're really useful things to have in your toolkit. Next, so 2 and 3, so understanding your customer and local strategy can go kind of hand in hand. So knowing your customer and the locality in which they serve, understanding what is important to them, what are they trying to achieve strategically and operationally, and where do you fit into all of that? So how can your business help or enable what is on their agenda? And you'll see as we go through this, all of the things that we've been talking about in previous slides to what we'll go through in the rest of today's session. It's all kind of aligning. So understanding what is important to the customer. How do you find that information out? That's by attending those events that they're hosting that are free for you to get involved in, being active on social media, posting about what's important to you so they can see that you're how maybe you're in alignment, but also understanding what it is that your potential customer is talking about, what's important to them, so you can be aware of that and can support with planning for tender submissions. 4 then, so this will come up in the do's and don'ts, which we are going to be covering shortly, but social media, as we've mentioned, can be a really great tool, and I feel like I'm repeating myself ever so slightly with this visibility one, because what we are saying is get yourself out there and join in with conversations with your potential customers. As I've said, post about what you're doing, stay up to date with events. I'm not going to ramble on about that anymore, because visibility is just getting involved in those conversations, making sure that you're visible to the market. So this will bring me on to number 5 then. So knowledge is power. Ensure that you are, where possible, taking the time to explore what your potential customers are speaking about. And again, it all links in. So if you are kind of making note of what your customers are speaking about, you are informed of, I guess these, I guess 2, 3, 4, and 5 are kind of interlinking now, but ensuring where possible that you are taking the time to explore what your customers are speaking about, their pipelines. So are you familiar with your potential customers' pipelines? What opportunities do they have coming up? Because that allows you to then, like we said earlier, set time around planning for the opportunity coming out to the market, so that you have sufficient time to take advantage of the full tender timeline, ask clarification questions. Clarifications is something that we'll come into in a few moments when we come to the do's and don'ts, but it's just ensuring that you've got enough time to respond effectively to the opportunities that you are looking to go for. 6 and 7, so hot topics right now. We have already covered both of these in detail, but every organisation will be being tested on social impact. So as we have highlighted throughout the session, ensure that you are able to tell the story of what your organisation is doing to create social impact. And finally, number 8 is absolutely key, and we will be covering this in more detail. So this is kind of just a whistle-stop tour of toolkit items, but actual knowledge of the competition process. So what does a tender process look like? What are the documentations that you're going to be coming across? How to find those opportunities. So when I jump on one-to-one mentoring calls, I tend to look into different types of language. So a thing that comes up when you're searching for opportunities, which some of you may be already aware of, or this may be completely new to some of you, is the common procurement vocabulary, or CPV codes, which are ways in which you can search for opportunities. So there's lots to learn about the competition or tender process, and we are here to support you through that. So this watching Go for Growth previous webinars, attending webinars, using our resources that we have on our website. There's a link to our website that we'll share in the slide deck from today's session. But yeah, we want you to take advantage of the support that is out there for you. So I'm going to speed up because I am aware that time is cracking on. So we're going to run over some do's and don'ts when it comes to promoting your organisation. And there is some of what we've already talked about in here in terms of your toolkit, but there are also some pointers around competition and responding to tender documents, which should be helpful. So I'll just run through a few of these. And what I will say now is, because obviously a 45-minute webinar is a short kind of whistle-stop tour of promoting your organisation. If you do want to discuss any of these topics in more detail, have a read through the slide deck this afternoon once you get that. And if you want to book some time in to discuss these points in more detail, you are more than welcome to do so. So the do's then, so cultivate good reputation and relationships, so keeping it professional. So I'm kind of thinking this, it makes me think about like your social media presence, or the messages that you're giving across. Ensure that you do have that professional tone, and that your potential customers, or if they do come across what it is that you're posting, is it going to stand you in good stead, kind of thing. So take the opportunity to raise clarification questions during the tender process. So this is something we covered very briefly just now. So within a tender process, there will be a period called the clarification period. So from an opportunity going live to normally around a week before the opportunity closes for submissions, there will be a period where you're able to ask questions directly to the contracting authority about the opportunity. So say, for example, you have a question about the pricing schedule, or you've asked this quality question, what do you mean by ... And within that clarification period, the contracting authority will come back to you to answer those questions. And I mean, it's a really important period, because you don't want to be guessing on any information, because it could really affect the quality of your bid, of course. So familiarising yourself with authorities' contract registers, published reports, forward pipelines or procurement plans. So as we've mentioned, having a look at those pipelines and what they have upcoming, so that you can inform timescales, understand what's important, as we've mentioned many times already. Keeping records of case studies and actuals delivered. So as we've mentioned, case studies may be requested as part of a procurement process, so it's really something good to have in your toolkit. What we will be coming on to shortly is the public sector supplier ready accreditation, which is accessible via Go for Growth. And there are templates for building case studies on there. So if you do want to take a look into that, it's again another really useful tool. Finding the right contact person system and keeping your details up to date. So if you have identified specific customers that you want to maybe target, you know that you're interested in working with, whether that be your local council, whether that be local NHS trusts, what systems are they using? So each contracting authority will have their own procurement portal where they post opportunities, and there are many of those out there, which again we can support you with, and we've got demonstration videos for the majority of those. But ensuring that you are looking in those right places, so you can set maybe notifications up to be made aware once an opportunity or a pre-market engagement notice goes live. So making sure that you read and understand any questions that require a response. So break down the question and understand exactly really what it is that they are asking you, because what it is very easy to do. And I've been the person looking at responding to tender documentation myself, and it's really easy to look at a quality question and then instantly be sorry, I can't So when you read a question and you know what you're wanting to tell the contracting authority, it can be very easy to just skim over the question and end up telling a story that you want to put across to the contracting authority. But then when the contracting authority reads your response back, it can often be that you've gone on a tangent talking about what you want the contracting authority to know about your organisation, and you haven't answered the question that they've actually asked in the first place. And there are word counts in tender opportunities. So it could be that by giving detail that you haven't been asked for, you've wasted the room within your response, which will get you the marks. You aren't going to be getting marks for something that you've not been asked to provide, if that makes sense. So focusing your responses based on the higher weighted questions. So as I've mentioned, there will be word counts. So there'll be questions which require more detail that will be are likely to have a higher weighting or a higher score. It will give you it will make up more of your score than some of the other questions. So it may be that there are 5 questions and a couple are worth 20% of your overall mark. Some may be worth 5%, some may be worth 10%. But it's important to ensure that I maybe get started with those ones that have the highest weightings. And obviously, if we are leaving enough time, if we're planning as we've kind of said to try and be doing, we'd like to hope that you do obviously have sufficient time to give as much focus to all of those questions that you've been asked. So if anything's unclear to you, don't presume, ask a clarification question. Make sure that you answer the questions fully and use the full word count. So if there's a 1,000-word question, try and use that full 1,000 words, but don't go over the 1,000 words because evaluators are unable to acknowledge anything above the word count. So utilize the word count to the best of your ability. Next, so make sure that you leave sufficient time to respond and don't leave it to the last minute. So again, all the planning and preparation can really support this. Check that you have submitted everything required in advance of any deadline. So within tender documentation, usually the ITT, you'll find a checklist somewhere within the documents highlighting what it is that you need to submit. So what's information only and what do you actually need to complete and return as part of your tender submission. So standing out from the crowd, then the don'ts, we'll quickly run through these. So oversharing on social media, these points, so the don'ts can be kind of polar opposites to what we've covered in the do section. So keep your online language professional. Manage unsolicited marketing. So if you are just reaching out and trying to, I guess, like cold sell to a contracting authority, it may unfortunately land on deaf ears. So like contracting authorities' email systems will have like automatic kind of spam things. So if it looks like a spam email, it may well end up in a junk email box and it's not going anywhere. It's kind of a waste of your time sending those messages. So look at more direct ways of communicating with your potential customers, such as attending those events and getting involved in those social media conversations, I guess. So don't assume that the person you are talking to knows your lingo, jargon or acronyms. So when responding to a tender opportunity, you obviously know the industry or the sector that you work in very well. And similar to in procurement, I could talk about CPV codes or PSSR, but if you're not familiar with common procurement vocabulary codes or the public sector supplier ready accreditation, PSSR and CPV means nothing to you. And that's the same for those people reading the bids that you are submitting. They need to know what it is that you're talking about, because although they are evaluating a bid on this for this specific industry or sector, they're procurement professionals, not industry professionals. I hope that makes sense. So don't overpromise, don't tell things, don't specify things or say that you can do things which you can't, simply. No overpromising. So don't change the format of documents. Use clear, unfussy text and keep illustrations straightforward. So in tender documents, you will tend to find that the contracting authority will give you guidance on this. There'll be like a box for you to type your response into. They'll tell you what format they'll want the text in, what size they want the text, how many pages to respond with, that kind of thing. So follow those instructions, absolutely. So assume a good social media presence or previous known experience will be taken into account in the procurement process. So don't assume that if a contracting authority is familiar with you, if you've worked with them in the past, that won't be taken into account in the evaluation of a bid. You need to tell the story of what you do in your response to the bid, because the contracting authority are marking impartially. So they don't mark as though they know you as an organisation. Again, next one is very much the same. Finally, ignoring the opportunity to continuously improve by using feedback from previous procurements to develop enhanced future bids. So you're not always going to be successful, and once you have if you submit a bid and you are for any reason unsuccessful, what you should receive from the public sector is feedback, which will break down your score in comparison to the winning bidder, and you'll be given feedback as to how like maybe where you could have improved, what you could have done better, what detail they were looking for that wasn't there. Use this feedback to improve going forward, very simply. So as we've mentioned then, the PSSR tool, we've mentioned this a few times throughout today's session, but basically we get asked a lot by providers about how they can show prospective customers that they are ready to do business with them. But also we get an equal amount of providers that ask us how they can actually start to prepare, get ready to do business in the public sector. So what Go for Growth have done is develop the PSSR accreditation, and it's free of charge to use, and all it requires is completion of 3 simple steps what are designed it's designed to basically help anybody understand the basics involved in a public procurement process. And if you do find that you've got gaps, what the tool is designed to do is support you. So there's lots of embedded support and resource in there. So as we'd mentioned previously, case studies, if you don't have case studies, there are links to templates that you can use to build these case studies. Or if there are certain policies that the public sector require and you don't have one of these policies, there'll be templates in there that you can review to support the development of policy for your organisation specifically. So once you do graduate the public sector supply ready accreditation, what you will get with that is a certificate, and it comes with 12 hours of continued professional development time. You'll receive social media banners for promotion. You can pop these on your little email signature as well. And Go for Growth are also very happy to promote this across our social media. So once you graduate, we're happy to do a post to say that your organisation has completed the accreditation. So the link there at the bottom of the slide is live for you to access, but if you would like any further detail on that, again, do feel free to contact us and we can discuss that in more detail. So I am aware that we have run over on time ever so slightly, and I do apologise. These webinars do go really quick. So I'm just going to run through the last few slides very quickly. So what we've done is we asked 10 public sector organisations what they thought the top 3 things were that providers tend to sometimes get wrong within the bid process. And that could be, so not answering the question. So as we've mentioned previously, so a question is asked and it's easy for you to kind of skip over the question and then tell the contracting authority what you want them to know about your organisation. It's important that you break the question down and answer it as the contracting authority have specified, because they will break the question down and tell you what they want you to include in your response if you look hard enough. And again, we can have a one-to-one call to kind of like look at some examples of this and break those questions down. So not submitting all of the documentation required, as we've mentioned, tender documents tend to come somewhere within them with a checklist, whether it's just an overview of what you're required to submit, or the contracting authority may well give you a full checklist so that you know what to respond to and what is there for information only. So caveating, so when bidders include conditions or exclusions around scope or price, what does it? It complicates evaluation. It puts the contracting authority in a pretty difficult position. So these issues should ideally be clarified during the tender period rather than left to appear in submitted bids as caveats. Specification requirements, so the challenge of ensuring that the proposal that you put forward relates to the requirements of the specification. So when you're responding to quality questions, linking back to the specification to tell the story of how your organisation aligns with the requirements of the opportunity. So reusing bids. So what you may be tempted to do if you're bidding for an opportunity that's very similar to one that you have gone for previously Even if you've been successful, this could be a terrible decision, because without assessing the relevance and ensuring that you've moved maybe references to other clients, it can be a real risky decision. It's not to say don't reuse part of your responses as long as it is relevant to the questions that you are being asked for this now, this current opportunity. Because it is quite easy to tell when something's been copy and pasted and it looks as though it's made for somebody else, or it's not necessarily relevant to the question that's being asked as part of the opportunity you are evaluating. So a lack of evidence to support the statements made. What we say when we are speaking with suppliers submitting bids, tell the story. Tell that if you're saying that we do ... tell us why you do that, and how you do that. What are the benefits of you doing that? We want to know everything. So think the who, what, why, where, when of what you are telling the contracting authority in your response. So have the awareness of word or page count. So if, for example, like we mentioned earlier, 1,000 words, don't go above that 1,000 words, because anything above that 1,000 words will not be taken into account by the contracting authority. But also, if it is 1,000 words, try and get as close to the 1,000 words as possible. If you're responding with only 500 words to a 1,000 word question, I could pretty much guarantee, without even looking at your response, that you have not provided enough information, or you haven't given enough detail as to what the contracting authority is going to be looking for. So assumptions by the provider that can... So assuming that the evaluator or the contracting authority will take into account their previous experience of you. As we've mentioned, they can only evaluate what you submit. And then compliance with the requirements, so failing to understand or meet requirements, so accreditations, policies, insurances. So if you are stating that you have these things in place, if you have this said accreditation in place, ensuring that you do have that. If you don't have it, there's nothing wrong with raising a clarification question to the contracting authority stating that, although I don't have this accreditation in place at this point in time, would it be reasonable for me to, could I ask that it's okay for me to have this in place by the time that the contract goes live? And what you actually will see very more commonly than not now is contracting authorities will just put that within the requirement anyway. So you must have the accreditation by the time that the opportunity goes live. You don't necessarily need to have it to bid for the opportunity, but if you are successful, you do win the work, you do need to have it in place. So hope that helps. Finally, then, just some key messages to take away. And again, I'm just going to pick a couple of these out because we have gone over, and I do apologise. I do ramble on, don't I? But reading the documents carefully, make note of those key dates. So make a note of the clarification deadline to ensure that you've got all, so have a good read of all of the tender documents, make note of any questions that you do have or anything that you're unsure of, raise those clarifications, but try and raise those as early as possible so that once you do get a response from the contracting authority, if you then have any further follow-up questions, you've still got time to raise a further question. Making keynotes of the tender submission date, then when you can expect a response from the contracting authority or any feedback, the contract award decision. Asking any questions that you do have as early as possible, we have literally just covered. So if it is a competitive tender and not a dynamic market, open framework or approved provider list, what that means is that there is only one opportunity to take part. So it's a standalone contract. There is one opportunity to win the work, and there'll be no other rounds of applications. It's just a standalone opportunity. So 2P may apply, so make sure that you understand the implications of this. You'll usually have to sign a confidentiality agreement to obtain the 2P information, and so don't forget to do this and try doing this as early as possible. 6, so have you uploaded everything needed for submission? This is again just repeating that checklist, ensuring, and we'll move on to number 7, check, double check and triple check before submitting that you have got everything that the contracting authority requires you to submit as part of your bid. You can never be too careful. I always make that. So there'll be a checklist somewhere, like I say, within the tender documentation. The tender documents are instructions of how how the contracting authority wants you to respond to an opportunity. So use that to your advantage. And then I usually make myself a paper checklist to ensure that I've got everything. And I'll have a colleague review what I'm due to submit before submitting. Just because a second pair of eyes cannot be a negative. Can't speak this morning. So finally, last couple of things then. So if you are wanting to access Go for Growth support and resources, there is a link to our website here where you can access tons of resource and useful information. You can access, say, our YouTube channel, previous webinar recordings, our support at goforgrowth.co.uk email address. That is where we will be sending the recording and slide deck from later today, but you're welcome to respond to that email if you've got any questions, anything that you want to cover in more detail, or if you do just want to book a one-to-one mentoring call, you can simply use the bookable calendar link, which is that last link on the screen now. And you can stay in touch. So if you'd like to get information on any of our other events or opportunities within the public sector, you can sign up to our newsletter. You can use the QR code on screen now, or you can follow the link. So I am just going to I've covered through that last element rather quickly, but as I've said multiple times, you are going to get the slide deck. So any later questions, do just send them across and we will answer them for you absolutely via email. What I am just going to do is, because we do have a couple of notifications in the Q&A, bear with me a second. So yes, I can send the link to the Central Digital Platform registration video. Absolutely, I'll include that in my follow-up email. So miss the first few minutes while you're sharing the slides? Yes, so a full recording of today's session along with the slide deck will be shared in the follow-up this afternoon. But that does actually cover all of the questions, and as I've said, thank you very much for your time attending today. It's much appreciated. We'll get the follow-up email sent out to you as soon as possible, and my apologies for running over ever so slightly, but thank you very much for your time.